nice experience when anyone is watching the recording, because this started midway, but I'm really sorry if I didn't start the recording earlier. Anyway, so coming back to this, so what we are doing here is we are trying to create a React control today using React and Fluent UI. So we are just waiting for npm to get installed, and once it gets installed, we'll start doing the code. Okay, so we'll just open it in Visual Studio. Oh, it's still installing. I forgot. Do you have any questions?
Danish, I do have one question actually.
Mm-hmm.
So, I created the control in Visual Studio Code, right? And I saw your post actually regarding that, like, you release a tool for the Visual Studio Code.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge I had actually is regarding, because my source control and all my code is actually in Visual Studio, right? So what happens, I build my stuff in VS Code, but then I go and kind of check in my data, like whatever the source code I have from the Visual Studio. I have a separate project for that. I have different folders where I'm keeping my PCF controls. Now the challenge I actually faced is when I went to the Visual Studio could not recognize that component, and I was getting some error over there. So
Yes. Yeah, Visual Studio won't recognize PCF project component or PCF project altogether.
though
But
we have not more, so I have the React projects there as well, but I do have Node modules installed too. So as soon as I install the Node modules, it start recognizing everything. But with the PCF, the PCF component, it did not recognize even after Node module installed. So
yeah, it won't. That's what I'm saying. That's why we are using Visual Studio Code, because
okay.
it doesn't support in Visual Studio as of today. That's why we are using Visual Studio Code, because Visual Studio Code is really open to any kind of
Mhm.
files. Whereas Visual Studio, you need to have those kind of files and those kind of projects built into Visual Studio for it to work. And because it's not recognizing PCF projects, it
Mhm.
won't compile or do anything. But I mean, I use Visual Studio as well as Visual Studio Code, both,
Mhm.
and both of them are I can use it with any source control I want. You just have to go to the source control here and then initialize the repository, or link your repository in Visual Studio Code, and then you can actually check in your changes from here itself. So you don't have to
Mhm.
go to Visual Studio and then do check-ins from there. I used to do that when I didn't know Visual Studio code a lot. So I was when I was migrating over, right? So I was maintaining Visual Studio for checking in, because
Mhm.
everything was set up in Visual Studio. All my repos and Team Explorer was all set up. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
so I was doing that for a while, but then when I migrated over to Visual Studio Code, I can do the same things from Visual Studio Code that I used to do it in Visual Studio. You
Okay.
just
All
have to
right.
spend a day to configure that on Visual Studio Code. Once you have done that, trust me, your life will be much easier. The only thing is, I'm hoping that you are using Git. If you're using TFS, then I think so you'll have to be you'll have to stick to
Yes.
Visual
Visual
Studio.
Studio.
Yeah,
Yes.
but there's an extension for TFS. So if you're working with TFS, there's an extension for Visual Studio Code, so you can try that out. I haven't, because we
Okay.
use it everywhere. But yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, my client is actually he hasn't moved to Git yet, so he'll be doing that soon, I guess. But until then, I'm stuck. But that's okay. Good to know. Cool.
Okay. So as I mentioned before, we're going to look at React. So to start with React and to start with Fluent UI, we initialize the project, right? So what I'm going to do here is we'll just first build out our control manifest file. So control manifest file is going to take one input property. So I'm going to say it as, so what we're going to build today. Let me show you that. So if you go to Fluent UI. There's something called as callout, which is I forgot where it is. It's under surfaces. So it has this button. So if you click on it, it shows this callout over here. And if you click again, then it hides the callout. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna change this body over here. That's the only thing that we're gonna change. Okay, we are gonna keep everything else the same, but the body is gonna be coming from the parameter. Okay, so we're gonna call this as callout text, and just copy over. And then it's going to be a single line text. We're going to keep everything simple. We're not going to do anything complex in the control manifest file because our focus today is building the React and Office using Fluent UI. Okay, so now going back to our index file, right? In the index file, so we would like to first create our React component before moving and writing anything in the index file. Okay, index file, you can as usual go and grab the context dot parameters dot no call out text. You can grab that and then keep it for safekeeping, but you can do it later on as well. So let's go and add a file called custom callout.tsx. Okay, so we are going to add a React file over here, and then it's basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the code from too many browsers open from here. Okay, so I'm going to grab the code as I have. Oh, there was a copy button here sometime. There's no copy button here. I thought there was a copy button, but that's okay. Copy the code. Paste it over here. Now, before we proceed further, we need to install the Office UI Fabric, right? We might not need React hooks. So to do that, we'll open up our terminal. And if you are new to using Office UI Fabric or sorry, Fluent UI or React, then when you go to the home, right, you can go to get started. And get started would give you what you need to install. Okay, so you can say npm install Fluent UI React. Initially, it used to say Office UI Fabric. That's why the code is still referring to Office UI Fabric. So we'll just install this. And let's see, once the node module gets installed. Okay, so now it's installing. Okay. It still says UI Fabric everywhere.
Yeah, even the import itself. So it's like they only changed the name from outside, but
Yeah. Well, I think so. Eventually, they will be changing everything to Fluent UI.
Yeah, there's a problem with the Microsoft. They changed their branding quite a lot.
Yep. Tell me about it. We have to keep up.
I started with the version 6, and then all of a sudden when I actually reached the version 7, oh, they changed the name. Okay, that's weird. Yeah. Hey,
They like to spice things up every time. People get
yeah,
bored.
I don't know how many trademarks they have. They might have destroyed the trademarks. Hey, yeah, one question actually about the CSS styling for the Office UI Fabric. What is the best practice to change any kind of styling for the Fabric UI controls?
Yeah. So as you can see, they have actually mentioned. They have actually given here itself how to, like, they have mentioned the style, right? And then they've used this merge style, which is the React's property, and then this styles is the custom styles that they have provided to some of the controls. So as you can, if you go to button area, where is button area used? It's not used anywhere. Yeah, so you can see like styles.inner, styles.header, styles.button area. So you can define your own styles in React as well, right? Using merge style sets, and then you can use those on your on your
Okay.
components.
Yeah, because sometimes I see like, because to be honest, the other React part that I work on, I usually use React.js, not the React TypeScript. For that reason, sometimes in the examples I see, they have overridden the properties using the interfaces and things like that, right? So I always get confused.
Yeah, so that's one of the thing. Once this gets installed, let it get installed in the backend.
Cool.
I'm gonna proceed further. Now we copied the code, right, and then paste it. But how do we pass data from your index file to your React file, right? Uh, Now this is where people get confused. Like if what they would do is, I've seen a lot of PCF components where they're passing the entire context that they grab from the init is getting, or from the update view is getting passed over to the React. I normally won't prefer doing that because it's too much information for the React. React should be lightweight. It should only interact with the properties that it needs. So React comes with its own properties. So yeah, this error went away, right? So React components always get two things, right? It gets the property and it gets the state. State is something that we maintain. We can maintain using state, right? But properties is what gets passed in to control. So for that, I normally prefer creating my own interfaces, which will serve as the property. Okay. So first thing that I do is I will create my property, and in this case it would be call out props, and so put this call out props, and then here I would define my property. So one of the property that I want is the name, right? So my call out text string, which will be of type string. Okay, so that's my first property. And because I'm using a property, here what's getting, this is a different code than what I have seen earlier. But basically, this is exporting a constant of a function component. You can use function component and then it takes in properties, right? So you can see right over here, it takes in the property. And then the property right now is set as blank. I normally don't like to use function components. I normally like to do everything in a class format. It's up to your preference. If you're comfortable with React and if you want to use function components, you have to just pass in the property over here.
It's depend if it's stateless or like it has a state or no. So it was like the best practice. If your component does not have a state, don't use it in a class. Use it as a function component.
Function component, right? Exactly.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
right.
So I'm gonna use class, and then because I'm using class, I have to get rid of this altogether. So extends. So now what I'm going to use is I'm going to use React dot component, and then this component gives me two things. It gives me the property, and then it gives me the state. It also gives me. I haven't used this ever. I don't know what this is. But yeah. So first thing is property. So my property would be the interface that my property interface that I created here. And then because it's going to be having a state, I'm going to also use the interface for state. Okay, we'll worry about what goes inside for now. I will worry about it later. So now I'm going to say call out property. And then the second thing is going to be call out state. Oh, I named it wrong. State. Okay. So that is what is going to be. And yeah, I need to fix this because I'm not using anymore. And this could be okay. So now what I'm doing here is no, I don't want this at all. Let me just get rid of it. I'll worry about it later. Okay, so now because I have a class, I can create my constructor in the class. Okay, so let's create a constructor here. And constructor, now because I have a property, I can pass that property as a parameter to my constructor because I can get access to the properties that get whenever the class gets invoked, I get access to the properties that have been passed. Okay, so call out properties, and then my super, because it's erroring out because it needs the property to be passed over. So props. Okay. So now that went away, and then that's it for constructor. We won't need anything else. Now what we want is we want our now because function components would have direct return to it, but whenever you're using class will have a function that would be of type JSX element. So we need to return that element, right? So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a function called public render, and then dot element, and this is going to be my function that is going to be returned. So it's and over here. Okay. So I'm going to format this. Why didn't it get formatted? It should get format. Something is happening. It should be formatted, but for some reason it's not formatting. Okay, so now I have written my render function, and in this I have this toggle is call out function which is calling the toggling. So now that toggle thing needs to be in my state. Okay, because I need to toggle the visibility of my call out. It should be visible, set to visible yes and set to visible no. So we need to toggle that, right? So for toggling, we would put that in our state. So we have defined it here in our state. So we'll say what should we call is call out visible, and then this will be of type boolean. Okay, and that becomes a state. So now here we would set the state as is call out visible. Well, is call out visible? We don't need it here. Yeah, we don't need it here. We'll just set it here. So this dot state is call out visible. And then this is on the toggle. So we are missing a toggle is call out visible function.
Danish, the one that you have used in the is call out visible. It's actually a text. It's not the boolean of the state.
Is call out visible? It
Yeah,
is.
it's a text property actually against the text property.
No.
Oh, it's using condition.
This
Sorry,
is a
I didn't see that.
condition.
Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry.
So
Yeah,
if
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Sorry, I didn't see that. Yeah, sorry.
yeah, it's a tertiary condition that has been used.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna
Perfect.
explain what the code is. I just like code is
No,
because the code
I
could be
did.
anything.
Yeah, I didn't see the ternary operator. Sorry about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. That's fine. Okay, so now we have this, but what we want is we want to create this particular function, right? So let's go and create that function on top. So I'm going to just copy that function from here, and I'm going to paste it here. So it's pretty simple. It just toggles the state of is call out visible, and that's about it. So this particular function goes over here. Okay, and then everywhere wherever they have used is call out visible, I just change it. Now here's the thing, you don't need to do any of this, and then you can keep it using function component, and then you just implement the property on the function component. That is very necessary. The only thing that you have to worry about is creating this interface for the property and then passing that that property interface as one of the uh, parameter, or one of the in the function component you can pass in the parameters. So one of the parameter would be the property. That's what you need to worry about here. Okay, we don't need dismiss, so we'll just comment out for now. And now because we are getting that property, right, so that property is sent as the props over here. And we also want to make sure that we are handling that in our state as well, because if it changes, then our state is what you normally use in your rendering functions, because if the state changes, then you're changing you get the function of set state, right? And property is like a read only field. That's what normally we use when we're developing the React, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to put my property. So call out to display, and then this is going to be my string. And I'm going to set that this dot state is equal to and then call out to display is going to be set from props dot call out string. And because I've mentioned that my state would have is call out display, which is not optional field, so it will throw me an error saying that I need to also provide is call out visible as well. So for as default property, I'm going to set it to false. Okay, so is call out is set to false. Okay, so now I have the state in call out to display as well in my state. So I'm going to use that in here. Okay, so this dot this dot state dot call out to display is what I'm going to put inside my text field. Okay, now this needs to be, so here is your React. So my idea today was not to explain you how to write React, but how to actually pass the attributes. Instead of passing the entire context, what you would normally do is you would normally pass in the attributes or the properties as an interfaces, and then use those properties only in your code. Don't pass the entire context and try to write all the context commands or context functions in here. Prepare your data in your index file and then send the data over to your React component. Okay, so here my React component is all set in my index file. Now I have to go and use React DOMs, right? React and React DOM. So first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to import React and React DOM. Okay, and then second thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use my callout custom callout, and then what's the, okay, so the name of the class is callout basic example. So I'm going to use that callout basic example and my name of my property. So here I'm going to do import, and import will have what, custom callout, and in the import I will have callout basic example and I callout property. Two things defined in the callout. Now in my init method, normally, now here's the thing. So whenever you're rendering your React component, you can do it in init method, but if you do it in init method, it would only render once. So if your property is changing, then it won't receive the new properties. So, and you don't want to render it twice on the or you don't want it to add it twice to the DOM object. You don't want it to add it in the init, and you don't want it to again add it in the update view. So you would only do it once. So instead of doing it in the init method, you normally would add the React to your DOM in the update view. Okay, so in the update view, what you would do is you would write the code for React DOM dot render, and in the React dot render, here you would do React. Where is React? Come on, React dot create element, and then inside the create element, you would pass in the callout basic example. So this one goes here, which is the name of your class, and then the property that you want. So now property is not defined anywhere. So we'll have to define the properties first here. So we'll say private React props, and this is of type I callout props, and because we're defining it, we have to also give define the values. So it would, otherwise it would throw errors because everything is required in it. I think so there's only one thing, callout text, and we'll set it to empty for now. Okay, and this is what we will be using here. So React props. Okay, and then it has two parameters. First thing is to create the element itself, and then the second one is where you want to place your element. Whether let's say you have different div tags on your control, and in one div tag you are showing a text value, but in the other div tag you want to load your React component. You can do that. Okay, so you can have a div tag created, and then you can add your component in the other div tag. But in my case, I'm going to load it in the container. So I don't have the container defined globally, so I'm going to define that today. So private, and then I'm just going to copy this and name it as the container, and it's that simple. And use this the container in here. So my React component is going to be loaded on this div tag. Okay, that's how my render component works. Okay, now this React property that we are sending, it's sending a blank text today. So what we want is we want to capture the value from our manifest from our callout text this property, and then pass that property over. So we would first capture the property. So we'll say callout text, which is of type string, and I'm going to get it from our context parameters dot. Again, what did we miss? Why is it showing sample properties? Can anyone tell me? So if I go here and I do this, it's showing me sample property.
We haven't built the project, right?
No build.
Exactly. Yep, exactly. So to build a project, I'm going to use, let me just build it from here. build. Any questions so far while it's building?
Just in terms of passing the context to the React component. Uh, so you are recommending that the best practice is to make all the logic that require the web API or other everything related to the context inside the index that TS and then pass those properties to the React component.
Yes.
Recently, I have built one control that like one of the action that will be taken once like a button will be clicked is to create a record. So I did not know how can I without passing the web API, I did not know how can I do it.
So think of this. What would you like if you're building a C sharp project? So are you good with C sharp?
Yeah.
Can I take that? Yeah. So if you're doing a C sharp project, right, you would always modularize your code. So you have to modularize it even when you're working with TypeScript or working with React. You would simply what you would do is you would do that web API call. So your React component is getting the data. Is that what is happening?
It's like first the React will display the data and like the user will have a button to do an action. It will create a record once he will click a button.
It will create a record once it clicks the button.
Yeah.
Oh, so React needs to send the data back to your index file. That's what. Okay, I haven't done that. But let me give a thought on it.
I did it. It's not. It will not send back. It's not like in terms of
No, what I'm
bounding or
saying is,
field.
I know you're passing the context as one of the property, and then invoking the web API in
Yeah.
React itself.
Yeah.
Well, ideally, I wouldn't like to do that. Because I want to have that separation between my index files, between PCF, between the framework and the React. React is just to display and do some activities. In your case, you are interacting with the data itself, right? So let me give a thought on that. I haven't worked on this scenario where you're getting the response from user in your React component, and then you have to do some activity with the context.
Okay.
So let me give a thought, and then I can get back to you on that.
I think Danish for that I'm not too sure. Like in the past, what I've done actually, if I have as such these kind of like calls, and I do have separate classes usually in React as well for that. So I just include those classes, and because the index would have that context anyway, so I just part that from there. But React would call that function because that's included in the the class. My thought.
So you're still gonna pass in the context, though, right?
No, I don't need to. So you have one function, right? And let's suppose the context is available within that. So that context, so you have a function which is actually on the index, right? Let's suppose, or any other TS. I'm not sure how that would work, but if usually in my case when I was working with the React.js and I'm still working, so in that case, what I do, I create those functions one place, right? All the where I have API calls and everything, right? And then the other components that I have, I just initiate that function, and that function would actually have, or that complete like whole class would have that context of the API, and you can call that function anywhere you want.
Right. Yeah, you can call the functions. That's absolutely right. Yeah, you can do that, right? But then won't you? So in TypeScript, it might be tough because you have to add the reference to your index file, and then now you're creating a circular dependency.
Exactly,
So
exactly. For that reason, you can create separate class, and you can keep that class
mhm.
as
Yeah,
the the way
yeah,
you
you
want.
you
But
can
yeah.
yeah, you can create a separate TS file,
Mhm.
but then you still have, yeah. Let me think about it. I mean, if you're using separate TS file, you still have to pass in the context, and I'm not fan of passing the context into multiple
I
things.
think Microsoft should release the best practices because we are start seeing some like huge control. If you notice the new schedule board, It's like basically like a PCF control. The new schedule board for the field
The
service.
field
It's like
service, yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's like basically like BCF control that they replace the grid with it. So it's like if we can see like how they did it there, like how they handle all the data interaction with the UI, so we can.
Yep. Yep. Good point. Anyway, coming back to the topic, so let's go and fetch the property, PCF property from here. So call out text dot draw dot draw, and if it is undefined, then I want it to be no. I want this to be the default one, saying no data. And now we have fetched the value. We now have to go and assign that value on our React property. So this dot React property dot call out text string will be the value of the local variable that we have defined. And this is how we would pass in the data on the property to our React component. Okay, so now if we go and run this, and there it goes. Okay. What just happened? May have not done this properly. There should be a button over here. Let us see what went wrong. And let's see. So update view is getting invoked. And this looks all good. This looks all good. Oh, we did not initialize the container in our init method. Don't forget to do that. Okay, because if I just define my HTML div here and don't do anything with it, it's not going to be initialized anywhere, right? So I'm actually adding the React component on an empty div. So that's what the issue was. So let me go ahead and then test this again. Oh, I should have just kept it open and then modified it. It would have reflected the changes sooner instead of closing it. But that's fine. In the meantime, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. Okay. And next time when I'll be doing demo, I'll be actually using my Visual Studio Code extension instead of PCF, instead of Toolbox, XRM Toolbox. How about that?
Yeah, good work on that, by the way.
Thank you. Okay, so now the button is showing up, show callout, and there you go. This is the value that we were expecting, right? And then the height, absolutely fine. If you change the value,
You just need to click it again.
yeah, we'll have to click it again. Oh, maybe no, because
Modify output change.
yes. So we'll have to do it one more time, and there you go. So now the value shows up, whatever is the value over here. Okay. So that's how you work with React and work with Fluent UI.
Would you be sharing that code onto the GitHub, because I didn't pretty much.
Yes, I did. I share the links with you guys. I've already created a repo on GitHub. under demo controls. I'll share the link again. And then this is the training April 2020. I have the data set control. I just did it few hours back. And then the field type control is also available over here.
Mm-hmm. And
So you
then
can,
you'll put the React one. Yeah.
I'll put the React one today. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So yeah,
Yep.
that's it. And trust me, using Fluent UI, I've recommended Fluent UI for each of my clients, and they just love it. It's so easy to use and so fast to build components, and which looks really good. So you don't have to worry about the UI anymore, and then you just have to worry about the data and then how they should work. That's about it. Because Microsoft has done an awesome job on creating this awesome library. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just it's like a replacement of the Material UI or on Bootstrap, which
Yes,
is really nice.
right. You can use Material UI, but um, uh, b- the look and feel is different for Material
Yeah,
UI.
exactly. But this one actually looks like an Office product, right? And
Exactly.
that's the whole point. That's why people are kind of start using it a lot because it looks very compatible with the CRM UI.
Hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
So they have tons of things over here, and they keep on adding this. Like last week, I didn't see anything for key tips. I don't know what that is. But yeah, I keep on looking at these things every now and then I see new things added by them all the time.
They've one thing which is really cool. I actually used it. It's the face file or the personas.
Yes,
I use them. They are amazing.
I think so. That's under.
That's actually in the list under the list, I guess. That's items and list. There is a
Oh, it's in
persona.
the. It's in. I think so. It's in the people picker. Yeah, that's what it is. Oh no, this is
No,
different.
it's in the list.
Oh, face file.
Face file, yeah.
Yeah, face file. Yeah, you're right. Yep. And you can actually increase the number of
Yeah.
spaces.
The
Okay.
other things you can do. It's pretty nice actually.
Yeah, size 48. This looks cool. Yep. So that's it. Do you have anyone has any other questions on this or anything else related to
Ju-
PCF?
Just for the question that I asked in the beginning, in case I have like multiple
Yes.
files that are shared among all the PCF, should I load them like from their URL from the web resource? Should I include them in each PCF I had?
Yeah. So I thought about it while I was doing it. I think so. You'll have to include it in each of your PCF because you have to reference them in your manifest file, no matter what, right? And we are talking about which kind of files are we talking about?
It's
What
like
is the extension of the files?
it's like JS files. It's like containing the metadata for because I'm building like PCF specific for like one project that I need to reference something from the metadata of their customization or like using some of their styling, using something from their utility like the API that
Hmm.
already defined. So we are already using it as a web resource. So should I reference them or like add them to each PCF control every project?
I don't like the way we have to add it. Like that's not the right way of developing stuff, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm totally against that. But I think so. You'll have to add them because we are working with TypeScript, right? So there's no way that you can reference anything that is not defined in the project.
Mm.
So if you can, I'm just thinking, how would you define it? How would you reference it in the TypeScript?
I thought in a method, but I don't know how much it's like official. If I install that, I have the like the type of them inside my like npm folder, and inside my code, I'm using the jQuery get script to load them in the in the initialization method.
So why don't you create an npm package?
That's what initially I was thinking too.
Yeah,
Can I
what you
create
could.
npm package locally? It's not like
Yes.
public.
No. It doesn't have to be public. It just have to be in your
Repo.
what is called, not ref, but artifact library,
Mhm.
right? It has to be published in the artifact library, and then you can just run npm commands to in any of the projects, and then reference them through there.
But actually, you know what? It doesn't. The purpose is still the same. To be honest, the way it's actually going to
Yeah,
reflect, because when you do npm, it's going to install the files, right?
right.
Maybe the other thought actually, because you said the web resources are going to keep the the styling and the configurations and everything. It's configurations, right?
Yeah,
Most
yeah.
of. So why not you create an entity and use the web API method actually?
Hmm.
You create one, like maybe just create one entity within the CRM, which is like very restricted and secure, and then you just put all the data in there as a JSON packet or so, and use web API call within the component PCF.
That's an option. Yep.
Yeah, I think so. That would be the ideal option.
Danish,
Hmm. Yep.
something similar to this. I had another requirement. I was developing a PCF, and where I had to read the metadata of certain entities, field type, and all things dynamically. So what I did is I used a web API call to the metadata to get the field type and primary field of that entity, relationship type, all these things. So inside the index.tx file itself, I'm using the web API and reading all these properties. So what do you feel? Is that a right approach or something else is better than that, doing that?
I think so. That's the right approach to do it. Yeah. I don't think so.
There
There's
is
any
there
other.
is already one function called get entity metadata
Yeah,
inside
I'm
the context.
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was using that. Again, one more thing. Sorry, guys. Like the same question we discussed before, to update certain fields back. But actually, today, just before this call, this is I think 3:30 a.m. Here, like around 12, no, yeah, 1:30. I was working on something. Like I had a requirement for another PCF control where uh, it's for a field, and it had to update multiple fields, and based on some conditions, sometimes it has to create a record also. So I have a separate TSX file. So I was thinking how to do that thing, because instead of returning back and coming back to the passing the index file, or using the like PCF has a web API method, instead of that normal web API from the React file I'm calling. So what should I do, or what do you think which is better in that such case? Like on a field change, I need to update 5 or 6 fields on the record, or sometimes I need to create a new batch of records.
And that's all happening in TSX file. Is that
Yeah,
what you, okay?
yeah.
And then you're passing the context .web API to your TSX file, where you and using that to create the records, correct?
I didn't do that. I was stuck there. I was just
Oh,
confused what
okay.
to do
Yeah.
exactly.
So Abu does the same thing, and
Yeah.
I mean, I'll have to look how we can do that. And as Jay mentioned, you can create a function in index.ts file, which will be using the context.web API, and then you can
Hmm.
retrieve the data from there. But
Yeah,
then
the same.
with it might work with JS files, but not with TSX files, because JSX files do not actually do any compile time error checking, right? So this is something that would fail on TSX file because
Or
it is not
or
referencing anything.
or you could just do TS ignore.
You
Yeah,
can
yeah.
do TS ignore
That I do use a lot these days.
So to be honest, I actually just started using that, and I'm like, okay, there are things
No,
where you have to use it.
yeah. So you only use that in only explicit cases, like for example, when you're working with context, and context, like as I showed, context had a lot of other properties in it, but not everything is exposed as of now. So if you really want something from context, that's when you might want to use TS ignore, but try to refrain from TS ignore as much as you can.
Definitely,
I
yeah.
ended up ended up using it everywhere.
Yeah, so one thing I noticed, like, when I was talking about that, in the Visual Studio, that component React was not working. So what I did actually, I did TS ignore for those lines so that at least my build actually passes, right? It doesn't throw me errors. So, that's when I'm kind of like, these are
Super
tricks
good.
and
Yeah.
yeah, it's.
So refrain from using that as much as you can. But to answer your question, I'll have to do some research, and again, that would answer Abu's question as well, into how we can, do some activities in the React itself without passing the context, because you can. I just don't like that methodology. Just to have some parity between React and your index file.
Yeah, Danish, if you remember, like I have cloned this repo, like your hover card list, and created another thing, another grid to show the aggregate below. Do you remember? I think I had tagged you in that post.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, so there, if the let's say some cases I need to update this calculator aggregates back to some records and all the parent records. Such cases, we will record this. You got my
Right.
point, right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
But I think the question becomes that for that scenario is then PCF is a good fit or not. That's actually kind of I get to most of the times. One thing I noticed, like the same kind of requirement. Let's suppose you have address like we have address implementation, address doctor, like there's a separate API. Now I have the requirement to replace that with the PCF, right? I was doing some kind of understanding around that, and then I realized, like we just have one field in, like there is only one field PCF control bind to, right? But then when I'm
Yeah.
typing in, at the typing in, and as soon as I get the right result, when I click on it, I need to populate 4 different fields based on, like some parsing logic, right? But those 3 fields I don't have access to right now. The only way I can access it is using xrm.page. So for those kind of scenarios, I don't know what's right, what's wrong, to be honest. Danish, any thoughts on that?
Why don't you create those as the bound fields?
But even if I create as a bound fields, I can't actually go. So when you go in onto the like form itself, right? When you go and bind the control to the form,
Mm-hmm.
you bind it to the one, right?
You can bind it to multiple. So
Yeah.
so the primary one is always there. You need one, at least one, to be bound, but you can bind to multiple properties. So I can add multiple of them here, right? And then all of them could have bound.
Mm-hmm.
And this then you once you build this, right, you get this in the get outputs.
Okay, and then
I
when you go to the configurations, you need to provide these 3 fields as well into
Yes.
your configurations, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
Jay, I think we discussed this in the second session. I remember, like
Yeah.
when it
Yep.
started. I think.
Mm-hmm.
I have
Yep.
one
I'm
control.
sorry, I think I missed it. Maybe. Thank you.
Yeah.
I
No
have
Yeah.
one
worries.
control that's binding for all the address field, like everything from the address, the city, the latitude, country. So it's you can bound it to more than one field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you
Yes.
can use xrm.page to fill the field.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, okay, but
That's
makes sense. Yeah,
yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, it solves my problem actually. Thank you.
Yep. No worries. And again, I mean, this is the last topic of all the sessions, and the last session that we have on Thursday is just question and answers. So go through your question and answers, sorry, questions that you have, and then we can go through those questions one by one, and then I'll try to answer as many as I can. If not, then I'll try to research them and then get back to you.
Okay.
Okay. So
Okay.
Well,
next session is
yeah.
going to be longer.
Yeah, that's fine. I've scheduled it for 30 minutes because normally we don't normally run out of time. But if we do, then we can do it for 1 hour. That's fine.
Good.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well, that's it for today, guys, and see you or talk to you on Thursday.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
Danish.
you so much.
Thank you. Thank
Stay
you,
safe.
guys.
Bye
Bye.
bye. Bye.